Hey, thank you so much for listening to Reversing Climate Change. This is Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of the show. The two sponsors are Eco Engineers and Philip Lee LLP. Oh, Eco Engineers. What isn't Eco Engineers? I've had a really great vantage point of carbon dioxide removal. And so often I'll start talking with a company and they will say something like, oh, well, we've been working with Eco Engineers for a while now, either trying to build this methodology or just trying to figure this project out, trying to get the quantification right, trying to figure this MRV out. That has happened to me so many times. And I've been glad to see them have so much success with so many companies in our space. Eco Engineers is essentially a consultancy that helps carbon removal tech and project developers get to market effectively. If you've ever started a company, one of the early decisions that you're going to need to make is which of these things can we bring in-house and which of these things do we need to pay consultants for? And often the conventional knowledge here is that it always makes sense to bring stuff in-house if you can. But I think bringing in very experienced consultants early on can save projects a lot of time and money. For instance, you might end up on the phone with David LaGreca. David's going to be on the podcast soon, and David has done, dozens of methodologies within the voluntary carbon market. And if you could just get on the phone with David for a little bit and you are trying to bring a new methodology or protocol to market, you have some new approach, you're a biochar project and you're trying to figure out, given your technology, region, biomass availability, what is the best way for me to work within the options that I have available to me? That's a person that you could very easily be paired with. David will likely shave off time and money from what would otherwise be a process that is pretty overwhelming. And that's just the start of it too. Eco has been engaged with people I've known or worked with, from everything from project design to the actual MRV plans, doing the LCA itself, registering the project, doing the diligence support, feasibility studies, tech evaluations, market eligibility. I feel like they're halfway to being an EPC without actually being an EPC for some of these things. Sometimes you don't necessarily need one person full-time thinking only about your project. Sometimes it makes sense to get 10 people on a fractional basis who have worked on collectively hundreds or maybe thousands of projects. Whether or not that will be the way for your company to go, you'll have to take the calls to figure it out. And I very much think you should do that. The link is in the show notes if you'd like to get in touch with Eco Engineers. Tell them Ross Kenyon sent you. Philip Lee LLP is a law firm with a lot of experience in carbon markets and carbon removal. If you've been working in this space for really any amount of time, you probably have noticed that you do need competent counsel to do business here. The contracts that get signed are frankly pretty weird. You're going to need help from a lawyer with a red pen. I'm sorry to inform you, your only choice is basically who they should be. And if you are deciding who they should be, you should be considering Philip Lee LLP. They've won Environmental Finance's VCM Law Firm of the Year for the last, since 2023, essentially. It hasn't happened yet for 2026. I imagine they're a contender for it this year as well. They are the largest legal team dedicated to the financing and development of carbon projects globally, and they have offices in the US, Europe, and the UK. One cool new thing I just learned, actually, is that they have been listed as a firm in Chambers Global as a global market leader in the area of climate change. This listing aligns Philip Lee LLP with around 15 to 20 of the leading law firms practicing in this practice area in the entire world. So congrats to Philip Lee LLP. Thank you to Philip Lee LLP for your generous support of the show. You make it possible for me to dedicate so much time to putting out content that I hope is useful to our friends and peers and fellow travelers in the world of carbon removal, climate change, and carbon markets. Thanks so much. Here's the show. Thanks so much for listening to Reversing Climate Change. This is Ross Kenyon, the host of the show. I am a climate tech and carbon dioxide removal entrepreneur. I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing today's guest because she explains what they do very well at the start of the episode. Our guest is Julia Reichelstein, who is the co-founder and CEO of Vaulted Deep. They are a carbon dioxide removal project developer. They take contaminated biomatter and pump it underground. The debate over competing uses for biomass will persist for a long time, and I suspect will continue as biomass has more and more value as people start to use it for productive things. And Julia, in dealing with some very nasty materials is able to sidestep out of that very large looming issue, or at the very least concern for those using biomass for carbon and climate purposes. I'm going to start the show right after this. If I could just make a quick ask, if you could please open up your podcast app and give this show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Write a quick review on Apple Podcasts if you're able. If you could follow me and or the show on Substack, that's also super valuable. And if you'd like, you could become a paid subscriber on Spotify. $5 a month. Gets rid of all the ads I don't read myself and occasional bonus content. Thanks so much for listening. Here's the show with Julia. That's me drinking water on the record.
Am I allowed to drink coffee on the record then?
You are allowed to drink coffee on the record, yeah. Thanks for coming on, Julia.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat.
I am too. I was happy we got a chance to hang out in Vancouver at Carbon Unbound. It was really nice to get a chance to meet in person. I always like going to those events too. So many of these people I see, it's like the disembodied torso of everyone I know. And then I get to see the rest of everyone, which was really nice.
Yeah. It's awesome. And it's fun to see. Yeah, it's fun to see what feels sometimes like an old group of friends, that we kind of were there. A lot of us were there at the beginning of an industry, and it felt really magical and pretty unique in terms of this, I'd say it's this call to action of we need carbon removal, and the IPCC report came out, and we need shots on goal, as Frontier says. And then there was just a lot of people that heeded that call. And so now I feel in those early days of the market, there were not that many suppliers, and you could look around the room and you're I kind of have been in these trenches trying to, help collectively grow this industry with these people for 5+ years now. And that's pretty special. I feel I have never been a part of an industry like that before. And I feel pretty grateful to be a part of it.
You came in through a strange way too, where you were an investor, and I think you probably cycled through ideas and engineered something that would get to the right volume and price dynamics people don't really do that for carbon removal. People usually start with I really like biochar and I live in Oregon and therefore I'm doing biochar in Oregon. Or there are scientists who came up with a novel electrochemistry pathway and then they're going to commercialize that. And you had the benefit, I think, of that extra layer out of what actually makes sense to do that's a viable commercial enterprise. Am I reading you correctly? Is that how you did it? This is your mythology that I'm recounting to you.
Yeah. I mean, to some degree, honestly, it's giving me probably more credit than is due. I didn't have a spreadsheet of, 100 ideas and the cost benefit analysis. But I was a venture capitalist before I started Vaulted, co-founded Vaulted. And I mean, just being a VC in general is the most magical job to be a founder, right? I couldn't imagine a better job if you want to be a founder, because you're getting this bird's eye view of businesses in general. And I was at Piva Capital, so we invested in climate and deep tech across, all industries, right? Anything that sort of touched climate or deep tech. And so I was seeing companies grow, everything from seed to, I think, Series C. So pretty good stage of development. But you just you get to discuss businesses and what makes them successful and theories of how they're going to win and how they're going to, attract the right capital, how they're going to grow, HR, people, all of it together. And that was this pretty magical experience to be oh, I understand now some pattern recognition of how, the companies paint that through line of, growing up and getting to, be big and successful and hopefully have a good exit. And so I already had that in my brain after a couple of years of just being a venture investor in general. And then, I got pretty lucky. I was at PIV at a time 2020 when carbon removal markets were really starting to take off, and Stripe was putting $8 million. I remember the first $8 million purchase, I think, from my now board member Ryan Orbuck, and he was we're gonna put this forward and start purchasing durable carbon removal. And yeah, it was just, as we were just chatting about, just this huge call for innovation. And so I got pretty deep down that space. I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden that was all I wanted to do at Piva was talk about carbon removal and talk to carbon removal companies. And it was early days, and I remember talking to, Noya and Charm and Heirloom and just understanding all the business models. And then I got pretty clear, that I wanted to kind of join them. I was like, this is such an exciting space. We need it so badly. There's so much room here for innovation. There's great new ideas, like, kind of felt like every other week coming out. And I loved being an investor, but I had always wanted to be a founder. It was like deep in my heart. And so I left, and they were so supportive. They agreed to sort of support me as like an entrepreneur in residence for, I think, almost an extra year. And so that was incredible. And it was actually someone at the fund who introduced me to my now co-founder. And so it was this pretty serendipitous, like, we actually got introduced about something totally different, not about carbon removal, not about the technology at all. But, he was telling me, my co-founder, Omar, he sort of took an invention by his father, which is slurry injection, so deep well slurry injection. And he really had commercialized that in the oil and gas sector, using it for oil field waste disposal. And he was sort of telling me about this and sort of telling me about sort of most of the oil field work. It wasn't quite, relevant to what I was thinking about at the time. But then he told me about, this project in the city of Los Angeles that takes 20% of the city of LA's biosolids every year. So that's human waste, post-wastewater treatment facility. And, he was kind of telling me about this, and it was like, it's really good for the environment. We're taking that waste. It's co-located. It's right there on site. We sort of slurify it. We put it 5,000 plus feet underground. It stays down there forever. It's safe. It doesn't cause earthquakes. It doesn't leak. We've been doing it for 15 plus years safely. And it's just much better for the environment, right? Like, anything that site doesn't take gets like trucked almost 300 miles round trip, to the Central Valley, where it's kind of spread on land, not productively used because it's human waste. So it has PFAS, has other contaminants in it. And, that's going into, obviously it's decomposing and back into the atmosphere. So the CO2 is being re-released, there's methane. And then obviously anything that's in that waste is going back out into local land, air, and water, as it's just sort of decomposing and going into groundwater. And so there's some, climate change benefits from putting it underground, right? You're obviously trapping that carbon really deep in the subsurface. You're avoiding methane, and then you're also, helping protect local land, air, and water, because those pathogens or anything that's in that waste is not going back out into local communities. Anyway, he was telling me all this. And he was like, yeah, it's the first project in the world to do deep well injection of organic waste. Like, we're the first company to try it. It's never been tried before. And I remember on that phone call, I remember being like, whoa, like, whoa. Honestly, I was like, I thought I had talked to every 2 guys in a lab thinking about carbon removal. And I feel like I just like met this person who was doing, to some degree, one of the largest carbon removal projects that nobody had ever heard of. And I was like, I had one of those moments where I was like, take a step back. Like, this is waste. He's a waste management company. He's like, yeah, we get paid to put it underground. It's really good waste management. We're saving disposal and processing fees, and we're helping, protect local environments. And I was like, 100% it's great waste management. It is also great carbon removal because it is durable, it is measurable, it has co-benefits, it's low cost, it's efficient. Right. And we know it can work and it's safe. And I just was like, that is a great carbon removal idea. And we kind of just like linked up, he came with the tech and the operating side, and I came with the this is how you can think about carbon removal markets and the sales aspect, and how you actually like build both a CDR and a waste management company.
Wow. What was the idea that preceded it? What was the top contender before you got into contaminated biomass injection? Can I say it that way? Is that allowed, or am I wrong in some way?
I just say deep well, deep well disposal. Yeah, waste disposal.
I think what I like about it is so many other companies that deal with biomass in the future, they may be competing for biomass that has alternative uses that are like pretty high. Like maybe you'll compete with pyrolysis for biosolids. Like maybe that's like a future. I would like to live in a future where people were actually trying to bid that resource up. That might actually be a future that was net positive in some way, but you're not going to be fighting over like forced residue, sawmill stuff. That's not going to be you. And that's sort of like a nice place to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I use the word waste pretty intentionally. Like, we really are taking real waste. And I say that like, I know it's a waste because for the most part, we get paid to take it. And we're a waste management company that does waste disposal as a service, just like you would pay a landfill to dispose of your waste, or you would pay a waste management company to dispose of your waste. And I like that better for a number of reasons, right? I like those wastes, one, because they happen to go really well with the technology. A lot of the wastes that we get paid for are moisture intensive. So they're sludgy. So I say the word sludge, right? Moisture intensive, oftentimes contaminated, pretty aggregated. And so they don't make great energy feedstock because you'd have to dewater them. They don't make great fertilizer because they're oftentimes contaminated. And so right now they're going to landfills or land application, maybe incineration. And so I like taking those wastes because they don't have a better use. You can get paid to take them, which is really important, I think, to build a scalable, durable, profitable company. And you're solving a really tangible local problem, right? Like when there is a waste management issue, you're solving a tangible local problem for that company that has the waste, and then also for that community that's like feeling the impacts of wherever that waste is going today, right? You put in a landfill, it's not gone. You still smell it. There's still leachate issues. You spread it on land. You've still got, groundwater, issues. Incineration, you've got, air quality issues. So I really like the specificity of waste because it's saying, like that local problem, the paying for it. And then, it's not, I don't call it a byproduct. I don't call it a residue because we're really focused on literally, the waste piece of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, waste as a concept here is something that it's a little bit too nebulous. I think liability biomass, I think, is maybe a better term for a lot of this. But then also, like, all of the same stuff gets lumped into it. And also the endless taxonomical churn. Like, it doesn't really matter what we call these things half the time. People think, like, if we found the one right phrase, it'll unlock all of the social dynamics around, like, who has to host these projects and, like, why and blah, blah, blah. So whatever, waste, liability, whatever. Okay, I want to go back to this question, though. Like, what preceded it? Were you already in the biomass gang? Were you like, this is like a category that I want to explore further, or were you even considering direct air capture or other pathways previous to Vaulted?
No, yeah. I almost wish I was as methodical as maybe the question.
Are you like kind of gut driven? Are you like pretty intuitive? Is that what it is? Yeah.
I'm very gut driven. Yeah, I'm very gut driven, and I'm very I do this work because I am impact driven. I feel that very strongly. To me, impact is what is sort of the good you're creating in the world multiplied by the scale you're doing it at. And so while I'm very impact driven, I am very business driven at the same time, because this actually ties to your question. I spent the first part of my career in international development, right? I lived in Peru, I lived in Nairobi, Kenya for a bunch of years, and I was working primarily, with the unbanked population, so people that don't have, credit scores and don't have access to formal financial services. And I was working with a lot of smallholder farmers in rural Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, a little bit of Somalia. And, doing sort of more like parametric crop insurance or like financial inclusion, fintech work, which was amazing. And I loved it. But I saw kind of two things. One, I saw climate change is very real in that part of the world, and it's happening now, and it's causing a lot of distress in terms of droughts and floods and food insecurity and conflict and migration and, a whole host of stuff that we know. So that really led me to want to work on climate. But then two, I saw, frankly, a lot of smaller social enterprises that had great impact intentions that could never really get profitability there, and they never really scaled. And so for me, I felt very clear, like I want to build a very impactful business, but it needs to be a good business that is profitable, that can make a lot of money, that can really hit the scale that's important for climate change and, important for, I think the world and what I wanted to build. So my lens was in that vein a little bit more. And actually the other idea I was working on was, I actually went back to Nairobi for a couple of months in that time and was looking at, how to build some of like the infrastructure layer around getting carbon projects in emerging markets, better access to the VCM, and to, registries, and doing more of like the MRV quality stuff. So it was totally different. It wasn't going to be a project developer specifically, but I really one of the things I love about carbon removal is, it's like fungible in some ways. So you can remove a ton in, East Africa, or you can move a ton in California, and it's like the atmosphere doesn't care where it comes from, which is like an amazing potential opportunity for emerging economies, and ways to build economies in that way, and have investment and job creation there. So I was really interested in that, and I was sort of looking at something there too. But then once I started really working with Omar on Vaulted, and we sort of got it going a little bit more, it became clear like that was the thing that I really wanted to spend my time on.
Okay. But there wasn't like another carbon removal pathway that maybe you felt called to intuitively, but to a lesser extent. It was sort of like taking a broad survey, less methodical than maybe I'm presenting it. But then once you came upon this organic slurry injection, you're like, this is the thing I've been waiting for. Everything else I've been looking at previously was on a similar plane of curiosity, and this is the thing. Is that appropriate characterization?
Yeah. Yeah. I also would say I met Omar 3 days after leaving my job. So it was kind of serendipitous, magical timing. And I think in my mind, you got to listen to the timings of the universe. I'm pretty instinct driven in that way too. So I kind of listen to it.
Let's talk about that. I am also that way. I'm pretty analytical too, but I often think I make my best decisions when I'm able to access things that are less articulable, things that kind of just feel right. I tried not to betray myself. There have been times in business where I've allowed myself to be talked out of my gut by colleagues in various ways. Those I look back on, I'm like, I really wish I had stood my ground, even though I didn't always have the perfect convincing language to do so. And you're nodding your head. You probably feel similarly. How do you know you're doing that for the right reasons, though? Because I can imagine someone also weaponizing this intuition and vetoing things that maybe they're doing for the wrong reasons. Like, how do you actually ferret out what's happening, and when is your body really smart and when is it not really that smart?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I love that question. I think for me, it's a hard one to get right. And I think for me, it's like, how do you get enough and give yourself and get enough space to really sit with it? I think as a founder, as a CEO, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of instinct to like move super quick and be super action oriented. And, you're facing opportunities and threats and distractions all day, every day. And, I think for a lot of us, being in execution mode is actually more comfortable, right? Like we're good at it. I love action. I love moving fast. I love being on that, super quick speed. And in some ways it feels amazing and you can feel like you're getting a lot done. I think what it can do sometimes is disconnect a little bit from the gut when you're moving so quickly. And so I think for me, I've had to learn, and it's been a journey. I've had to learn like, okay, how do we move, slower from a human perspective? Me as Julia, as the CEO, how do I create enough space so I can really sit with it? And then really ask yourself those hard questions. Like, where is this really coming from? Is it really that good gut instinct and you want to listen to it? Or is there some ego in there? Is there some fear in there? Is there something else clogging those gears that you should maybe like really look at and reflect on and say, hey, we're going to sit with this a little bit more. So I don't know. I try and do that. For me, I'm a big trail runner. So I do that a lot in nature. I do, even as, and it's been crazy the last couple of years at Vaulted. The crazier it got, the longer my runs got. I started, at first it was like half hour. Then I started doing an hour. Now my runs are like 2 hours. People are like, how do you find the time? And I'm like, it's the best thing I do as CEO is go on those long runs and like really meditate on some stuff. And try and really keep yourself honest, like really what is happening here for me? Try to make the right decision.
I think people would imagine that for project developers like Vaulted or some of the other very successful carbon removal project developers, the job gets easier at a certain point. Like you have major offtakes, you have some amount of financial security. It is presumed by outsiders. Things are probably going well enough where I don't know, if the teams at Frontier or Microsoft or Google have vetted you enough to link their reputation to yours, you're probably on the right track, and therefore it's easy. But I know enough to know, I know many of these people, and it isn't really like that. One, why do you think people do think that? And what is it really like? Why are your runs getting longer? Surely they should be getting shorter. You should just be like going on like a 5 minute, like let your dog pee in the yard kind of walk at this point. Like, isn't it good for you now?
Yeah. You know, it's just different. It's just different. I don't know if it's easier or harder. It's different problems, and I think it takes a different skill. And I think actually that's one of the coolest things about being a CEO and being a founder is like there's so much personal development that happens because you have to learn how to be the right CEO for that stage of business, right? Like, and in the early days, it was like, okay, how do I, the skill sets were storytelling and painting a picture, painting a vision that people could understand and get behind because all there was a pitch deck, right? It was so early. And convincing people that you were going to be a good steward of their money and a good investment. Or, for us, we spun out of my co-founder's company. So there was a lot of, that company had to decide that they wanted to, bless this spin-off and that we were going to create, not destroy value. And of course, that was, that took time and sort of vision pick. So there's like storytelling and then obviously early team formation. It's a lot of doing it yourself. And there was a lot of like just doing, like as I talked about earlier, there's a lot of just like, how quickly can you move? And my days were jam-packed and I was moving a mile a minute and I was trying to do, a lot myself and then get early people on board. And then as the company grows, it's much more about human, development and being a good manager and figuring out how to be the right leader for the right stage of company for your leadership team and developing that team and making sure that you're functioning really well in the team. You've got good organizational health, right? You've good management systems, good boundaries, a good culture. And then you'll sort of, I think for us, really continuously learning of, kind of the early stages where really get our existing sites ramped up. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. We've got sort of two sites we work with, one in Hutchinson, Kansas, our Great Plains facility, and then one in Los Angeles, California, the one I mentioned before, which, we work with Advantech, the company we spin out of, our partner on that one. But both of them now are really ramping up. And so there's a lot of early, okay, how do you really operationalize carbon removal? How do you get from that site in Kansas when we started was doing like 2 trucks a week? We do, 50 trucks a day. So how do you do that ramp up? And so there's a lot of like operational nuts and bolts learning that takes a really different team than the team that's going to like take the playbook and execute over 10 sites. Right. And so I think there's just been different like stages of the company and of the progression. But to me, one of the coolest and hardest things is like, what does the company need me to be at each one of these stages? And how can I figure out how to be that leader that's effective at that stage? Because it's night and day from 2 years ago. Frankly, from a year ago, it's night and day. It hasn't stayed the same for more than a year. So I think that's a really cool part of the job too.
It mirrors what you said earlier about selecting Vaulted in this particular pathway where other people come in looking through the other end of the telescope and are like, I have this technology, how do I commercialize it? And I think a lot of people make their companies in their own image, for better or for worse. And sometimes that results in CEOs that last the duration and get to, what's the old line? You rarely get to be both rich and the king, and like only a few people get to be both. Zuckerberg is one of the people who gets to be both, and it's like not that common. Like a lot of CEOs get fired by their board much earlier because the person who found something is not the same person who's necessarily the best at growing it. But I think a good portion of the way that one might be able to blunt that threat as the CEO is to ask a question of, what does the company need me to be? Not how do I fit the company around my strengths and weaknesses so much as like, okay, I'm a person who can learn and grow. How do I be the right leader in this context? And I don't hear people ask that question that often. I think that's a really emotionally and intellectually wise way to do things. You get that just like beaten into you by experience, or how do you possibly learn such a thing?
I am so grateful to the people I have around me. Honestly, some of my board members, my mentors, my coach, I'm pretty spiritual, my spiritual life and sort of that practice, like I have a huge team that's like helping me figure this out. And I feel endlessly blessed to like have them and have them in my ear and have them supporting and coaching. But I also think, and that's honestly like 99% of the answer. And then I also think there's like something in there of what I actually said earlier. I think you're right, is like, I do this work because I want to be in service. Like, it's really important for me. Like, the reason I'm doing this is because we want to have a positive impact on the world and be in service of a planet that is habitable and safe for everyone for generations to come. And so the reason I did this work and started this work, it was to be in that service. And then I'm like, okay, the point is about the company. The point is Vaulted, and Vaulted being successful because I really believe in what we're doing is so good for the planet and so good for community health and for local environments. And so it's like, what can I do to be in service to the company so the company can grow and be successful? And like, as much as I can change and try and be an effective leader, let me do that. If there's a time where I'm not the most effective leader, like, no problem. Vaulted is first. Like, that's the very clear North Star that I feel, and that I actually think like the team feels too. And that just keeps us like, you know, eye on the horizon, I think, like focused and grounded.
Great answer. Less common than maybe one would hope. All right, since you dropped a hard S, so I have to ask though, but spirituality, this impacts your work. You're like a hardcore nuts and bolts, like operational excellence, scaling a company. Are you even allowed to talk about spirituality, Julia? How does it impact your work at all?
Yeah, am I allowed to? Yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of who I am, and I think it probably does show up in the company, right? It must. I think for me, a lot of being spiritual is about feeling that connection to the broader world, the universe. I mean, you can take that in whatever way you want. If you want to say God, if you want to say the energy flows, if you want to say just humanity, like whatever. I feel it, and I can tap into it. And I think like when you feel how connected we all are, if you really see yourself of like, we are really the same, we are one, and you can feel that to some degree, then it makes it pretty clear. It's again, it comes to the service part of like, of course we want to help each other, and of course we want to contribute, because it's not like me being, you know, benevolent and like saying, hey, I'll help out over here. It's like, we're the same. We're, you know, it's fulfilling in that way. And I think it's good for our souls to be a part of contributing too. So I think it must show up like really prominently in sort of like the ethos here. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. I connect to that too. I'm smiling. I hope you don't read that in like a patronizing, mocking kind of way. Like, I also think this is a big part of the work, and people are better off when they can acknowledge it in their own way. Okay, but then I have to take it to one extra level, which is a little bit stranger. So it's also possible this doesn't make it into the show, but
so excited.
So like this focus on big, hard questions require more exercise, more being in a condition of physical extremity or exertion at the very least. Do you ever feel like some of these ideas, solutions, things come to you that don't feel endogenous to your own brain, but maybe more like answers that come to you in a spiritual way outside of just, I'm super smart and I'm running, but does creativity find you? Do you resonate with this at all? Yeah.
100%.
I like that too.
Yeah. I kind of have this, we can figure out if we want this in the show or not, but I kind of have this front of brain is good. It's good, you know?
Okay. This is like front of house, back of house here.
Yeah,
like
back of house. The back of house that's like connected to this broader wisdom and this broader universe, that's where the magic comes. And so I think a lot of the time I'm like, my job is to quiet front of brain so I can hear back of brain, and that's where the best things come from. And also the things that like are rooted in the right stuff, it's not the ego and it's not the fear and it's not that stuff that can get cloudy. So 100%.
I said this on a number of podcasts previously, but so much of my life has been about cramming more knowledge into my brain. And I think at some point in the last couple of years, I realized there's serious diminishing returns from that. And actually, I need to be cultivating open space, intuition, wisdom, and noticing how different those two things are. And I'm working on trying to develop that because I feel like I have like the raw ability to harness that. And I actually think that's like a universally, democratically accessible way of processing information. It's not like you have to be special or touched by the divine in some way to do that. But I'm trying to create more space for creativity to find me and for the less analytical, more intuitive part of my processing to take over, because some really important insights have come from that. How can I better harness that? What advice might you have for people listening who this might sound a little bit woo, or at least semi-woo, as Emily Swaddle recently called it, but like I think it's also true woo, as she also called it. Like how do you actually do that and operationalize it in a way that makes actual business sense, that you can say with a straight face to your very serious board of investors?
Yeah. I mean, how do you create it? I think that's a muscle and a practice and a prioritization, right? That is, what is your spiritual practice? For me, that's, I go to church, but I also trail run. And that's just honestly just as much a part of the religious practice as the church part, and that space. And yeah, again, do you create that time and you honor it? You've got to have there's like ritual there. You have to protect it and you have to honor it and you have to believe in it and like put some work into it. So I think all of that. But from a business perspective, honestly, one of the things that, is really important, I think, for what we do, for what Vaulted does, is remembering, like a lot of waste management companies or carbon removal companies, this is real, tangible infrastructure and jobs and lives and safety. And it's like safety of humans at an industrial site. It is safety of truck drivers. It is safety of local environments when you're doing something new with where waste goes or where carbon goes. And like, you have to be really careful and intentional and safety oriented and thoughtful. It is not a move fast and break things industry, or it shouldn't be. I think there is a lot of danger there. Danger not only for people and environments that we're trying to protect. I mean, the point of what we do is to try to protect humans and the environment, but also like danger for the industry of like, if you move fast and break things and you're a young industry, you're not going to build the credibility and the proof point that you need to grow. And so like, the intentionality I think that spirituality brings and that clarity, it's a little bit slower maybe than a Silicon Valley software startup, but it's a little bit deeper. And I think that's a great match for like what we do, at Vaulted and a lot of other developers do, which is like real world operations and, care for the humans that work at the company and around the company and the environments as well. So like, I almost feel like it flows really well. It's like almost aligned from like a business perspective of what we should be doing and also where it comes from. And I also, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think we've got, I might really need to think about if I want this in the show or not, but I think we have an opportunity right now of just leaders, especially in America and globally maybe, like leaders figuring out how to lead in a different way. I think we've seen a style of leadership for the last 20, 30 years that has been a little bit more, I'll call it nuts and bolts, like business perspective. This is what we should do, action oriented, a little more front of brain. And I think one of the coolest things that I'm interested in right now And a part of my job, and one of the most rewarding, is like, how could you think about being a different type of leader that leads from a different place and is still incredibly effective and still builds a great, big, profitable business, but come at it from a little bit of a different spiritual place, different energetically. And what could that mean for the company that you're creating and like the business that you're trying to build? And I don't know what the answer is to that yet, but to me, that's like the most exciting journey that we could be on, that I could be on in terms of my own career.
What is it about saying something like that that makes you feel, puts you in a position of vulnerability that you may want to take it out of the show? I feel like what you said is totally sensible. I would want to work with someone who was tuned into this stuff and emotionally not a maniac. And I've worked with plenty of CEOs who are straight up maniacs, and I would not take another job. If I caught a whiff of that at this point, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this, and I don't think we're going to get along if I do this. And so you telling me this makes me trust you more. I'm like, okay, Julia is someone that I would follow into this with, because I know that the matters of the heart that are so important that people always neglect and say are for big, stupid softies are not appropriate for a leader. That's like, we need someone who's like really good at making hard decisions, and that's not someone who's soft. I actually do not think that's true at all. It's a bad meme. I would like to see that meme replaced with something better than it. But you feel like even if you know it's true, it's hard for you to say that out loud in a business context.
Yeah. And I totally agree. I'm like, to me, there's nothing like, maybe there's a softness and an intentionality in part of it, but there's not we're not going to make hard decisions and we're not going to make the tough calls or have those tough conversations. Like, to me, there's like, how do you lead in a place where you're just as, if not more effective from like a business outcomes perspective? You're not losing. To me, again, the North Star is like, it has to be a big, impactful, profitable business to matter on an impact scale. So like, there's no fighting. There's no conflict of interest there. Like, we make money when we put tons underground, which is the impact that we want to have. So like, it's collinear in the, framework of TPG. And so like, I'm not in conflict there. And that's one of the things I love most about Vaulted is like, there is that really deep alignment. But I think, there's a keeping a focus on being a really effective business leader that is building a big, profitable, successful company. Could you actually do that just energetically from that different place? I have this like talking about instinct. I have this like instinct that this is where we're headed. My hope is that this is where we're headed as a society, that maybe we did decades and decades of this old leadership style that caused a lot of people a lot of pain, and it was very profit over everything, and it was profit maximizing, which of course is kind of in some ways the way our capitalist system works. And I'm wondering if like there's like a new wave of leadership coming that I would be excited to be a part of, that thinks about it differently. And that's like kind of like when I think about like the world in 20, 30 years, like maybe we're headed in a really cool direction from that standpoint.
What is happening at Vaulted now? What's next for y'all? And then we will find ourselves at the conclusion of this episode that went in a bunch of unexpected ways, I think, for both of us.
Sure did. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, but it was definitely not what I thought we were going to talk about. So that's awesome. Okay, what is Vaulted doing now? I mean, so, as I kind of mentioned before, and as you know, Vaulted, at the core of it, we're really a waste management company, right? We take organic waste that today goes to landfills, incinerators, or land app, and is really just being disposed of. And we take that and we find a better home for it. We put it really deep underground where it's permanently stored. That's better for climate because we're locking away all that carbon, and it's also healthier for sort of local environments. And so we've been doing that, as I mentioned, in both Great Plains and our Hutchinson, Kansas site, as well as with our partner Advantic in Los Angeles. So a big piece of what we've done the last couple of years is really showing that we can do carbon removal at scale from those operational facilities, right? So we've done over 25,000 tons of durable carbon removal to date. We're on track to do, I hope, fingers crossed, on track to do, something like 50,000 tons this year alone. So just like, I'm really here. I'm here for scale, It's like if it
Those are
does,
big, like non-biochar numbers. Those are good.
yeah, if it's not here for scale, like it to me, it really matters that we can show it. And that's also one of the great gifts of being a spinoff. We're only 4 years, technically we're only 2.5 years old. I've been working on Vaulted for 4 years because the spinoff took some time, as you can imagine, to get right. But, one of the magical things is that we spun off with a mature technology and these two sites that we were able to kind of press play on really quickly. So my co-founder did 15 years of tech development so we could get to the place where we could sort of press play and get to that scale. So, we're really focused on like just continuing to make it more and more efficient. We're finding new ways to get more efficient even at our current sites and ramp up trucks and figuring out how to, lower emissions with every ton. So there's like more sort of processing there in terms of, sort of efficiency at those operating sites. And then what we did the last couple of years was really, as sort of build that carbon removal reputation and brand, and had some good success in selling to some of the bigger buyers. So with, Frontier, we signed with them like 115,000 tons. That takes us, I think it was 2024 to 2028-ish. And that was sort of a really good chunk of our first, deliveries out of our operating sites. We then had sort of a landmark deal with Microsoft of nearly 5 million tons, which we signed last year. That really gets us, nearly to 2040. And so that's just like this magical kind of, I think I said before, revolutionary, I really believe it, kind of contract where we can then say, okay, we know we have demand to really do this at scale. We know we have a technology that works. Let's go build those sites. Like, let's go get more sites online so we can really do this, a megaton by 2030. That's the North Star of the company. And so most of the company is focused on new site development, right? Most of the company is going and finding, okay, across the US and North America, and then, the world one day, where are those good sites of good geology, waste where we can actually solve that problem, right? Where there's ideally there's a local problem to be solved, right? Maybe there's a PFAS issue, PFAS like forever chemical. Maybe there's a nutrient runoff issue. Maybe there's an odor issue or a methane issue, right? Where can we go in and actually say there is a local environmental contamination issue because of waste that's being disposed of? We can come in and be that partner that's not only like better, better waste management and sort of disposal solution, but also we can kind of solve that local, maybe environmental contamination issue or community health issue. So we can come in and really say, like, there's a reason why we're here. We're not just here to fight climate change broadly. We're here to help you not smell that on the way to work or not have PFAS in your drinking water, right? Like, and that also really helps, of course, to get the trust and the engagement with the communities. And then, of course, we work under Class 5 permits with EPA. So then, of course, we're always finding, where's their permit, where's their waste, and where's their geology. And so most of the team time now is like, okay, let's go look at, kind of those sites and work with our waste partners to go find those really good co-located sites. So we like to be like right at the paper mill or right at the wastewater treatment facility or right at the landfill. So we're not trucking, and it's like the most efficient, cost-effective waste management and carbon removal that we can be.
What's it like having a company spin out of an existing company within carbon removal?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. It's its own thing. It's its own thing. I've actually now started like a spin-off founders support group where there's like only founders done spin-offs.
Wow. How many others are there?
Not just in carbon removal, like in general, and mostly climate tech founders. But it's a really different, interesting journey. So I could talk about this for a long time. But it's pretty different. Like you get this amazing, head start in a lot of ways, depending on what you're spinning off, if it's a technology or a team or a plant or, whatever it might be. And then, there's also a lot of dynamics that come with that, right? You've got then, a company that you spun out of that has their own perspective and thoughts and feelings and needs from all sorts of angles. And I think you have to be really clear about why you need to spin off. Like what can you do as a separate organization that they couldn't do or didn't want to do or that you could do better at? And so you've got to get like really clear really early. So I think it's interesting. It forces a lot of good intellectual rigor around what are you trying to build? Why are you trying to build it? What can you bring that other people can't bring? What's your theory of change? Like all of that was forced pretty early because I couldn't just be like, okay, we're going to like get going and just start doing stuff, right? You had to do a year and a half of picture painting and analysis to get the go ahead to spin off, right? So it's an interesting journey, from that perspective. I think it forced a lot of honestly really good discussion and a lot of like alignment with, the existing company. And then you also have to get capital that understands that journey. And I will say Lower Carbon led our seed round, and they were fantastic partners to like be a part of that journey with us to help us understand like, how do you value intellectual property and how do you think about the value of this intangible thing within the company and then outside of the company, and sort of be a capital partner as we like unlock that spinoff. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of dynamics, as you can imagine, with multiple stakeholders. But if you can get it to work, which is a big, I think one of the things I learned was I stepped back at some point. I was like, oh, you actually don't see that many venture-backed spinoffs, and that's for a reason. I was trying to find this support group that I started eventually, and I was like, oh, it doesn't exist. I can't find it because there's not that many. And that should have told me something about how hard it was. But I didn't know. So I went ahead and we figured out a way at the end, and I think we're all glad we did.
I love doing shows on alternative means of founding, funding, and exiting, and this has not been one of them. Is there a lot of opportunity to do this spin out model, or is it just pure luck that you're here? It sounds like it probably is closer to that than anything. But are there opportunities that if people were looking in the right places, they might be able to find deals like yours and duplicate them?
Maybe. I think you definitely need some luck, and I think at the end of the day, you need a company. If you're spinning out of a company, you need a company that can see and appreciate the vision of what you're trying to build and why you need to spin out, right? Because like the status quo is that company owns 100% of the thing. And I think a natural starting place is like, why wouldn't we just do it? We could build another business arm, or we could, have a subsidiary, like why would I go give up 100% ownership to, have this be its own little organism that then I don't fully control and I don't own 100% of. And if it is going to be this really big, magical, valuable thing, why would I take that trade-off? And so you have to find, I think, a team on that company side that understands sort of the value you can create when you've spun off, and make that really clear. And frankly, like a lot of leadership teams, one, I think they got to see it, which is hard. It takes some vision and some trust, and then they really have to trust you that you were going to be able to do it, and you're not going to go spin it off and then fail in 2 years. And hey, they could have kept it. So I think there's some trust building that's really important in that journey.
Thanks for being on, Julia. Really appreciated having you, and thanks for letting me ask you some, frankly, bizarre questions. I was glad we got to do this.
Thanks, Ross. I loved it. I had a great time, and it was really interesting and thought-provoking. So thank you for asking those questions. I honestly don't get asked those every day. So it's pretty cool.